heaven is a place on earth. They say in heaven, love comes first. We'll make heaven a place on earth. Ooh, heaven is 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 a place on earth. All right, guys. So that was the opening song to Black Mirror episode San Junipero. And guys, many are saying this may very well be the best Black Mirror episode there was. I believe it did win an Emmy. And what was very interesting about this Black Mirror episode, unlike the previous ones, is that it, for lack of a better word, ended in a very optimistic way, which is something that hasn't been with the previous Black Mirror episode. They always end quite pessimistic and bizarre and kind of leaves this pit in your stomach. And that has kind of been pretty much the Black Mirror theme. But this is different depending on your perspective. I have encountered some perspectives that say that in a way it's still a kind of a negative Black Mirror ending episode. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the review. But I'm more leaning toward it was probably, I'd say, the most optimistic from what I'm seeing, what we're going to get with Black Mirror. So it opens up with the song I Just Attempted to Sing, which is a very 80s song. I believe it was performed by Belinda Carlisle. Heaven is a Place on Earth. And also found that a very fitting song. And I'll explain a little later in the review why I felt that song was very fitting and fit in well with this episode. But our main character here's name is Yorkie. And we're given the impression that Yorkie is in 1987. And immediately I'm going, what is interesting about 1987? Not much technology there. This is pre-internet. And so it's not long before we discover that we're only led to believe that this is happening in the 1980s. And the other character, who I guess I could class also as a main character because her storyline seems to start to kind of overshadow Yorkie's, Kelly, we get to find out that this isn't the 1980s. In fact, this isn't even a real world because she actually punches a mirror, and as the shot cuts to her hands, there's no injuries to her hand. There's no damage to the mirror. So you immediately go, oh, okay, this isn't real. And we find out it is, in fact, a simulation. And there has been this attraction between Yorkie and Kelly, as we got to see. Yorkie having the suppression of her feelings, being a person of the lesbian community, and trying to coming from a family that wasn't accepting of this, and because of that, Yorkie storms out of the house one day. She's in a bad car accident that leaves her paraplegic. And this is how she enters into this simulation, which seems to be a simulation for people who are in a state of a great disability or are passing over to death. And they found a way through technology in order to bring people over a type of consciousness download, if you will. What's been very interesting about that topic of the being able to upload your consciousness, as crazy as it sounds, people are actually seriously making theories about that being possible, even slicing the brain and being able to upload all this data. Of course, you would probably need something like a super quantum computer or something like that, some singularity technology maybe we don't quite have yet, and something like that would be possible. And of course, what comes to mind is movies like Transcendence and various things like that. But as we cut back to Kelly for a second, and Kelly's storyline kind of reminded me of Mr. Nobody. And that was a movie that came out some years back with Jared Leto. And it discusses, it talks about the last person who is about to die right before they're on the cusp of living forever. He's like that. He's at the cutoff line. So you imagine if a type of immortality is basically discovered with the assistance of machines and technology, that there would be this cutoff point right from the last generation that died. And that's what Mr. Nobody is about. And that's what Kelly's story is about, where Kelly does have the opportunity to pass over into this technology, this simulation, this type of simulated heaven, if you will. But Kelly is guilt-ridden by the death of her daughter and her husband, who doesn't want to accept this, knowing the daughter died and saying that he will die just as the daughter died. So with her, I think it feels like a type of betrayal, and that she will be leaving them and going on to kind of exist and find some type of continuous immortality and happiness without them. And I found all that very interesting, quite compelling story. And again, yeah, I think I do have to agree that so far for me, as I haven't seen all the Black Mirror episodes, but up to this point, this is the best Black Mirror episode. And I thought it touched on a lot of the various, a lot of very interesting topics with technology and advancements in technology. What I found interesting is that how people appear in this simulated world isn't how they appeared in reality, right? In reality, they're much elderly because, of course, they're going to be aging, and and also they're in a state of disability and various things like that. And what comes to mind is virtual simulations, virtual worlds we have today, like Second Life, where people who may have disabilities, or virtual reality or virtual worlds in which things can be used, or you can use technology to create a form of escapism from your disability, or even the type of life you're living. If you're not satisfied with your life, you could be anything you want in these virtual worlds. And so that kind of came to mind when they didn't appear how they really were. And that was quite surprising in the episode when they start going, I want to see you how you really are. And then they go on to meet each other in real life, but are very accepting of each other. And I just thought about how people meet online and how they create these various personas, and people actually fall in love with people online they've never met. And when they fall in love with these people, when they meet them, even if you watch like episodes of Catfish, these people are so torn because they are really in love with these people. It's still the same person, it's still the same personality, but it's not physically the person. So it's almost like a shell, right? It's a shell, and inside that shell is the same people, but on the outside there's something different. And I found all that very interesting. Also, I found it interesting that the how they use this technology, right? It wasn't quite like the other episodes of Black Mirror where we've seen similar virtual world type technology used. This was very much advanced. This is some type of way to preserve a person's consciousness into a computer. And I also found that very interesting because as I was thinking, like, what happens if like the human race dies out? Like, who would monitor this? And we get to see these robots controlling everything. And also, what would it be a case where what happens if people would much rather live in these simulated constructs than in real life, because these simulated constructs could provide them everything they need? And so, like, who would run that? And of course, we get to see this type of robot revolution where this company called Tucker that's also clubs in these simulated realities that basically run this simulated world, right? The simulation. And going back to the song now, heaven is a place on earth. For them, with the use of technology, this does become a type of heaven, right? A type of heaven on earth that is controlled and run by robotics and computers, and they're stored in the computers on earth, although they're in their own little dimension of this heaven that they've created. Just a few other interesting tidbits I found about this episode that came to mind was going back into the character of Yorkie. There are certain scenes where this guy keeps trying to get her to play this video game and various things like that, and she crashes the video game. I forget the name of some type of 80s video game where they're crashing, the car crashes and it flips. So she just can't handle it. And I find out, oh, the reason she can't handle it because it's causing her to relive the accident she had in her car, which caused her to become a paraplegic and caused her to go into this state, this disabled state where she has to now be in this simulated construct to kind of live a normal life. And also even the dancing scenes goes back to her sexuality, being a lesbian, and when she's being trying to suppress that from her family, not accepting that in the Tucker Dance Bar Club that's in the simulated construct. She's having these problems looking at all these gorgeous women dance around her on the floor as her desire for them increases. So all very interesting. Kelly's basically running away from the pain of her real life, losing her family, losing her daughter to cancer, I believe, and just running through these, just trying to forget, escapism at its best, and her guilt to not be happy, but to live with this guilt. And her and Yorkie do accept this virtual heaven at the end. And I found all that very interesting as we move forward with our technology. Kind of makes you pose the question, would that be some type of heaven in this virtual reality? People know it's that and just accept that, or would that kind of, in a sense, end up being a type of eternal torture? And I guess that will, be different depending on what your perspective of it is. But I recall the what comes to mind in a more pessimistic end of the Black Mirror, if it still wanted to kind of relay that in a sense, is this show called Caprica, which was a spinoff of Battlestar Galactica, which was actually a prequel. And I remember one of the Odama's daughters who had died at a very early age is kind of, her consciousness is kind of transferred into this computer, into this virtual world. But she's freaking out because she feels real, but here she's trapped in this virtual world and can't get out. And it's enough to it's just freaking her out. Like I would imagine it will probably do to people, especially people who aren't used to going into this world, which is kind of actually what was kind of cool about the episode. You did get to see people able to go into these worlds before they die. So I would imagine that would make the transition a lot more easier when they have to just stay in there. And that's why Yorkie wants Kelly to go ahead and die so they can be together forever, because obviously it's time limited how long you can be in this virtual world, and you can only be in it, I believe, like 5 hours a week, and that's just not enough time for Yorkie to see Kelly. She wants her to go ahead and die so she can be with her all the time throughout eternity, or as long as the computers and the machines run. So all very interesting. I was very fascinated with this episode, and I'm gonna give it a full thumbs up, guys. I'm gonna give it the number one for right now. The number one. Some people like playtest better. I think it's this. I thought playtest was just a little bit too depressing for me. I'm going with this episode, and there are some more that I'm going to review and see what's happening with them. Maybe I will change my mind about it. But so far, guys, I thought this was an awesome episode. Guys, let me know what you thought about this Black Mirror episode. Guys, if you like content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and until next time, take care.